Well, look, let's talk. I'll touch on this actually with my next guest, but I want to talk about what's going on with Ukraine. Of course, that has led to a huge spate of refugees as well across Europe. Bob Seely is Conservative MP. He's also a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Russia. Good morning to you, Bob.
Good morning, good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Before we talk about what's been going on in Ukraine, can we just touch on what Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, has got to say in America? I've just gone through this, saying it's an absurd, unsustainable system created by international asylum laws under the 1951 Refugee Convention. Do you agree with her?
Broadly, yeah. I think pretty much anything Suella says is incredibly sensible. So my default position is I agree with her. Have I recently or have I this morning reread the convention? No. But I think she makes an incredibly sensible point, and I thank God that I have colleagues like Suella who actually have the courage and conviction to argue their case.
Will she be backed by the Prime Minister and others?
I think there's a very good chance that she will be, and she will be backed by most of her colleagues. There will be a certain type of her colleague who will privately sneer to The Guardian and to the BBC, but they won't stick their heads above the parapet. But for people like me, look, I'm half immigrant myself. My mum came here legally, just like Suella's parents. And there are people up and down the country whose ancestors came here perfectly legally, who think actually you should come here legally. And the idea that you can boutique shop where you're going to claim asylum is absolute nonsense. And what we need to do is have a system. I personally, Julie, would like to see a system where every member of Parliament votes in Parliament on an annual quota for migrants and immigrants into this country. You know, we might get it wrong sometimes, we'll get it right other years, but we need to take that responsibility. And so everyone knows that their MP has voted for this or for that, and they can hold them directly responsible. It's what democracy is about, and it's what we should be doing after Brexit.
Oh, hear to that. It's very rare. I want to actually applaud somebody at the end of what they say, but yes, I absolutely agree on all of that. Look, let's talk about what we invited you on air to talk about, and that is some really ongoing concerns about what has been happening to the Ukrainian people under the jurisdiction, under the rule of Russia, and big concerns about from the head of a UN-mandated investigative body into the torture, extensive, widespread torture being used by Russians on Ukrainian people, not even just soldiers, but innocent civilians as well. And they say it's so brutal that they've obviously, some people have been simply tortured to death.
It is immoral, it is cruel, and it is incredibly stupid. And for a major state to be doing it, I think is an absolute disaster for the reputation of the Russian Federation now and for years into the future. And it is basically more reason, Julia, why we have to give the Ukrainians the tools to win the war in a timely way that they can afford. Because I was in a place called Kramatorsk about 3 weeks ago, which is a relatively frontline city in Ukraine. It's about 10 miles, 15 miles from the front. And I was in a command post watching one of these battles as it was going on. And I figured out when I talked to the guys afterwards, for every 100 meters or so, they're losing a soldier. So they are paying a very, very high price. And that's a dead, not just injured. And so the price that the Ukrainians are paying is a very, very high one. And we need to make sure they've got the kit before, frankly, raising a volunteer army becomes more difficult in that country.
Indeed. I mean, the routine, torture and rape as well being used is absolutely true. And again, it's a modus operandi from the Russians. It's what they do in every war they've been involved in.
It is, and actually, we should have been wiser when this was happening in Syria. And I did ask in Parliament, I said, let's at least name these people. So you name the Air Force units, you name the Air Force pilots, who in this case, they were bombing hospitals as a primary target. And we were saying it was wrong, but we didn't actually do anything about it beyond complain.
Well, thanks to Ed Miliband.
To be honest, I think thanks to sadly lots of people who are turning a blind eye to what the Russians were doing. Ed
Miliband's the reason he that vote, and Hillary as well. Hillary Benn, those who campaigned against us getting involved there. Let me ask you also just finally about Ukrainian military. They've another attack on the Crimea. They're going to be getting some more long range weapons. We know from the Americans after that Zelensky visit to Washington last week. But we believe that the Ukrainians believe they've killed Admiral Viktor Sokolov, the commander of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, along with 33 other officers. That's a big hit, isn't it?
It's a big hit on the current command, and they're degrading both the command and they're degrading a lot of kit. there is a long way to go there, but clearly they're doing a lot of damage to the Russian Black Sea Fleet. The main physical battle is remaining, though, on the southern and eastern front lines. And progress is steady, but it is quite slow. And I think the important thing for the Ukrainians now is that they can't let up, because every time they let up, every time they stop fighting, the Russians dig another mile of trenches, another mile of landmines. So they have to keep going.
But are they getting enough support, though? Because one of the things that I'm very aware of, that, you know, I don't think we've discussed Ukraine on the show for a week or so, and I'm very aware, you know, we need to keep it on the front line. We need to be keeping it on the front pages. We need to be talking about it. Something Zelensky knows, that the war weariness of the West is one of the biggest issues we have in the West, with the sort of, oh, you know, bored now. Oh, well, let's give up. Let's not help them anymore. Whereas actually we need to, well, we should have given a lot more help a lot sooner, and then we wouldn't be where we are right now.
The really important thing, Julian, you've hit the nail on the head, is that we need a systemic operation in place, so we don't have to keep looking in the cupboard to seeing what spare kits we're rummaging around for spare kit. We need to be producing enough shells, so 10,000 a week, because the Russians are firing between 10 and 40,000 shells a day in some places, and in some time. So we need to be just producing the basic sort of 155 artillery shells and the ammunition that they need. All the Gucci kit, all the fancy kit is an addition to that. But we need to have got that in place, so we don't have to keep rummaging around giving them stuff. So we've got the system in place to support them, so they can fight long term.
I really appreciate you joining us, Bob Seely there, Conservative MP.